Indiana and Wisconsin, they meet late this season in a game that could mean a lot, or it could not mean a lot. We'll talk about that on a Locked On crossover of Hoosiers and Badgers here today.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in. It is a Locked On crossover edition of Hoosiers and Badgers. I'm Jacob Goins, host of Locked On Hoosiers. He is Ryan Harings, host of Locked On Badgers. And man, it's been a long time coming for us to get on a show and talk a little bit together. And once we get into the colder months, we'll talk some basketball and things on the hardwood. But man, fall practices have started. We're now into the month of August where practices are here. Games are being played this month, but Indiana, Wisconsin will have to wait just a little bit. November 15th is when these two teams come together. Your Badgers come to Bloomington. And man, this season, I'm hoping is going to be a lot of fun, including this game on November 15th.
Yeah, I can't wait for it. And I almost got to ask you, there's a lot of Badger fans that are just a little petty is maybe the wrong word, but I think it kind of is. Like, how can you get in the playoffs as Indiana when we've been so close for 20 years? And then suddenly they expand to 12 and there's Indiana.
Yeah.
And awesome for you guys. By the way, I was cheering for you guys because I'm never going to cheer for a Notre Dame or some school like that. But
Well, we appreciate that.
But gosh, man, there are a lot of Wisconsin fans that are just like, come on, now you expand the playoffs? Come on.
I totally get it, brother. I totally get it because you're right. Wisconsin, from watching from the outside looking in, it's like, yeah, they're always there. They're always on the cusp. They're always have a chance. They got a ton of talent. They always get somebody they're not supposed to. And then, yeah, here comes Indiana, right? Here comes Curt Cignetti from a guy that most people hadn't heard of. And yeah, you have the most historical season in the history of Indiana football. So look, it was magical. It was awesome. But for us in Indiana and for Curt Cignetti and his players, they've moved on. They're like, yeah, we don't care about that anymore, which I think is cool. I want you to appreciate it, but they're like, yeah, we got to move on. We're in a new season. And these two teams and these two programs, Ryan, it's so fascinating because I don't know how to judge which direction they're going or where they're going to be in the next 5 years because Cignetti just got to Bloomington, but it feels like Luke Fickell just got to Wisconsin too.
Yeah, and I'm really curious about this, and I'm fascinated to talk to you because I wonder where your fan base is. Obviously, great traditional basketball school, incredible basketball fan base that has struggled on that side of it a little bit more. But the football did this. Like, is it setting new expectations, or is it just kind of like, hey, here's a little bonus appetizer that you don't have to pay for, but this is still a basketball school. I'm fascinated by all that. But then you mentioned Luke Fickell, and you're right. Like, he was brought here to not even be the same level Wisconsin, which was really successful, to raise that level. Like, let's get to the next level. And what the inverse has happened, right? We haven't even stayed at the same level we traditionally were. We've gone downhill a little bit. So I do wonder at times if we, just because of the world we live in and the air we live in a very whiplash society. What just happened? That's the most important, right? And I do at times wonder if, the pedigree of Wisconsin's getting discounted a little bit because they missed their first bowl game in 22 years. And if maybe Indiana's getting overhyped just a little bit because they had a great year for the first time in forever, there are still things that go into building sustained winners. There's, culture, there's intangibles, there's built up just fan support and facilities that go into sustaining success. I think those things still mark pretty well for Wisconsin in terms of returning. And I'm curious where they mark for Indiana. But again, I'm fascinated by the fan base. Like, what is the reaction to this incredible, and it was an incredible run in football. What is the reaction to that from the fan base for those outside of that bubble?
They love it. I mean, look, it's no secret. You said it and everybody knows it. IU is basketball. That's just what you've known it to be forever. And sure, Indiana's had a good football season here and there, once every 10, 12 years. But Ryan, going into last college football season, the Indiana football program had more losses than anybody ever in college football. They had more losses than anybody. And it's like, man, nobody really expected anything a year ago. You wanted it to be better with a new head coach and a guy who had won everywhere he's been with Curt Cignetti and James Madison. But it's like, man, a bowl game would have been cool a year ago. That's what the true Indiana football fans would have talked about. Then all of a sudden you start winning some games. You beat UCLA, you beat Maryland, you start winning some of these. It's like, oh, this team's actually kind of talented. Then by the end of it, you beat Michigan at home, which was a big deal. Yeah, you couldn't hang with Ohio State, but you got more wins than you've ever had before, and you make it to a college football playoff. And so the fans now are like, this guy's awesome. We love football. We want to do it again. And it's like, okay, hold on just a second, because that's not natural. That's not realistic to say you should make a playoff every single year. But the good news is the team is still really talented. They brought back a ton of dudes from a year ago, and they filled the holes they needed with the transfer portal. And I truly do believe that this team is just as talented, if not more, at Indiana than they were a year ago. So the fans are bought in. Curt Cignetti demanded things, and he got them, which is why I believe Indiana can become a legitimate football program. But with you on the Wisconsin side, you're right. I mean, you guys have everything it takes to be a competitive football program, and it just seems like you're there and so close. And I love the Luke Fickell hire. I loved him at Cincinnati. I thought he was a great coach there. I thought he was the answer, but going into this season, it seems like he might not be, right?
Yeah, and listen, we're going to hit on something that I wanted to ask you about. Just the contrasting schedules that both of our programs face this year. Wisconsin has a brutal schedule. And, for a program that's trying to kind of climb out of, if you've seen, you're younger than I am, I'm pretty sure, but like the never ending story, there's the swamp of sadness where the horse just gets stuck there and you can't pull them out. Yep. That just got to get out of that. They got to move forward. But you look at the schedule, they play Alabama on the road. They have Oregon on the road. They have Iowa. They have Ohio State at home. They still get Indiana and Illinois and Minnesota and Washington. Like, it's just a brutal schedule for a program that desperately needs to show forward momentum, right? And I think I'm curious your take on this. There's a big part of me that would love to have an easier schedule, would love to cash some of those in for lower rated programs, which is something Indiana has done. Coach Cignetti has done. I don't necessarily think that's a silly move. I think it could be equally a little soft, but equally really smart. And I'm curious on your end, from your fan base, is there any internal angst in the national discourse isn't particularly kind to Indiana when you see them kind of do some of those things? Does that matter? I don't think so, quite frankly. My take has always been, if you make the playoffs, who cares how you get there?
Right.
I don't really. Like, if Wisconsin didn't play Alabama last year and they played Kennesaw State, they go to a bowl game. That's worth it to me. You don't get a scout badge for a tougher schedule. However, I do think there's a middle ground. Do you think Indiana's gone a little too far on the soft? I don't want to say soft, right? But do you think they've gone too far in that direction?
Yeah, I do, because I've stated several times I'm not a fan of it, right? Canceling these games against Virginia and others, and picking up more games against Kennesaw State and playing Old Dominion. It's like, as a fan of college football, I'm not a fan of it. But as I stated in our last Locked On Big Ten Squad episode, I understand why Indiana's doing it. Because you're right. If you make the playoff, it doesn't matter. If you make it to a big-time bowl game, it doesn't matter. Who cares who you beat along the way? You just have to earn the respect when you do. And so, not saying I want Indiana to go on the road to Tuscaloosa by any means, but I don't want to play 3 cupcakes back to back to start the season. It's miserable. I don't think you get anything out of it. So there's a fine line somewhere. It's funny that you and I are on opposite ends of this, with us playing nobody and you guys playing Alabama. Like, I don't envy you, brother. I hope you guys can survive it down there, because that's a heck of a trip. And look, I hated to see the way the game went last year, because you really didn't get a fair shake with how it went down early with the injury. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of it, but again, I think this team is really good. I think Wisconsin's a good team too, but correct me if I'm wrong. You got people saying it's the toughest schedule in the country, right?
Yeah, came out today. I think Pro Football Focus has it number 1. I think a couple places have it top 5. It's a brutal schedule. There's very few layups outside of a couple early season, Middle Tennessee. It's very few layups, and this, sometimes it's just the best teams are the best teams because they have depth, right? The best teams are the best teams because their second group of players are just better. And when you play Bama and Ohio State and Iowa and Indiana, who's going to be really good this year, and Illinois, you're going to get beaten up. You're just going to get hit by larger, physically more talented athletes. That takes a toll. And it's like a boxer in the 11th, 12th round. You're not going to be at your best. So at the end of the year, when you're playing in Minnesota, who's also a good team, you're going to be beaten up, man. So, yeah, I think you nailed it, though. I love the point you made. There's a middle ground there. Well, we don't need to play Bama and Notre Dame, who Wisconsin's playing next year, right? You don't need to do those things. Like, they're playing Pittsburgh and Notre Dame next year in out of conference. You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
What's the middle ground? And I think that's where, if more teams moved in that direction and they could unify a little bit, I think we'd all be happier with it.
I agree. Absolutely agree. Well, that's sort of what the schedules look like for both of these teams as they get closer to coming together on November 15th. But what do these rosters look like? Who's returning from a year ago? Who are the newcomers? And what are the names you need to know? We talk about that coming up next here on a Locked On crossover of Hoosiers and Badgers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and your spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also going to build some wealth along the way, and with a specific, algorithm and all the different all the different, topics and all the different subheadings and all the different things that you can do within the Monarch app. You can literally track anything: your spending, your saving, your wealth, your investments, everything in one place with one app. Monarch Money. It's the way to go. I use it, and so should you, okay? Take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, we continue on a Locked On crossover. He is Ryan Harings of Locked On Badgers. I'm Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. And this is where we get to educate each other's audiences here, Ryan, because we get to talk about our teams. We get to talk about the guys on the squad, the ones who are going to be on the field, and hopefully winning some games for our respective programs this fall. And so I'll leave it up to you. Would you like to start offense or defense? And where do you want to start highlighting in terms of most impactful for the Wisconsin Badgers this year?
Yeah, let's start on offense because I really think that's where the biggest changes are going to come. They've replaced their offensive coordinator. That's a massive deal, and a lot of people will tell you you're only successful as the people around you, right? Great people have great people around them. I think that's true in everything. It's true in football, but it's true in families and relationships and businesses.
Absolutely.
And Fickell made a bad hire. He brought in Phil Longo, who there was a lot of hype with him. Drake May and Sam Howell and those UNC offenses, he did not fit in Wisconsin. And I've talked to some people in the program. It just was not a fit. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes talented people go to good places and the puzzle pieces just don't match up. It was a disaster. The quarterback play was bad. It was inconsistent. They couldn't generate big plays. The running game wasn't great. So they brought in Jeff Grimes, who I think just fits a lot more of what Wisconsin wants to do. Coming from Baylor, Kansas, formerly of BYU, when Zach Wilson was there. He's had a pretty good track record as an offensive coordinator, but he wants to run the ball. He wants to use motion. And if you think back to, the really good Wisconsin teams,
it was motion.
It was running the ball, right? I think this is going to be a better fit, and that's a big deal. So I want to start with offense. I think Jeff Grimes, we talked about players, but I think he's as big a part of this as anything that happens this year is a switch in the offensive philosophy. And then you bring Billy Edwards Jr. over from Maryland. The Badgers were really excited to get him, and I don't think they're excited to get him because it represents a monumental shift in the ceiling of this program. I think quarterbacks that are still in college as a senior are in college for a reason, generally speaking.
Rare.
But he gives you something in terms of size, mobility, and toughness that they just didn't have with Braden Locke last year. Braden Locke was 6 foot and didn't move well. Billy Edwards is 6'3" and moves pretty well. He can extend a play. He's been in Maryland, so he's taken shots against Michigan. He's played against, big time competition in tough spots. And he's done it in a disadvantaged situation because Maryland hasn't been great. So I think they feel really good internally. And I should say, I know they feel actually pretty good internally about getting to getting better at that spot. And I've said this entire offseason, and I'll say for the great Indiana fans that are going to watch this, the Badgers just have to get to middle of the pack. They have to go from terrible at quarterback to decent. And if you do that, and I know you talked about it on a recent squad show we have, just better quarterback play changes everything. And I think they can get that this year.
Yeah. In terms of what the production all around him looks like, are you confident that he's got the playmakers on the outside, the offensive line to keep him protected? We know what the history of offensive line at Wisconsin is. It speaks for itself. But, is this a team that's putting up 30 points a game, or is it, hey, we'll put up 20 and let our defense kind of bail us out here?
I think it's potentially upper 20s. I think it's 26, 27. I don't know if they'll get to 30. And again, some of this ties into the schedule. It's hard to get to 30 when you're playing the teams are going to play this year.
You're right
But
about that.
they're going to be better. I'm incredibly confident the offense is going to be better because they'll have better quarterback play and a better offensive coordinator. I will say this, the one spot on the team, if you ask me what's the strength of this team, it honestly might be receivers, which is crazy for Wisconsin.
Okay. All right.
Might be the best player on offense. Averaged 17 yards per catch last year. He had more yards per catch against man-to-man coverage than Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. He is really good. He's going to be an NFL receiver. Then they brought in Jaden Ballard over from Ohio State, a 6'3", 6'2" guy, runs 23 miles an hour. They're going to put him on the other side. Billy's going to have a couple weapons. So that won't be the issue. There are some questions on the offensive line. Depth there is a problem, but I think they're going to be fine there. And again, I think I'll say it again, but I think the offense just getting too solid is going to be a big deal for Wisconsin this year.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about Indiana's offense, which, I mean, was just so exciting last year. And again, everything that happened a year ago was just like a surprise. Nothing was expected of that. So everything was like, oh, wow. It's like you go to a 4th of July fireworks show out on the lake or something and they shoot a new firework. You're like, whoa, I've never seen that one before. And it's like, oh, wow, that one's pretty over there too. Oh, that's got some cool effects. That was Indiana a year ago across the board, but especially on the offensive side of the ball, because you bring Curtis Rourke in, who's from Ohio. He was playing Maction the year before, and it's like, we'll see what happens. And then it's like, oh, he was pretty good. Running game was really good. Receivers were incredible. And now you feel like you have a repetition of that this year. But the struggle that Indiana had in the big games, Ryan, you watched it, was up front. Indiana couldn't hang with Ohio State, Notre Dame. They just couldn't because of the guys up front. And now Indiana has several transfers on the offensive line that I think will be improved. Will it be a strength of this team? No, probably not, but it won't be a flaw of this team like we saw in the big games a year ago. You still have Elijah Surratt. You still have Omar Cooper. So you have both of your receivers back from last year. Running back by committee, but I think it's going to work out between Kalen Black returning and Roman Hemby in that room, the Maryland transfer himself. And then the story is Fernando Mendoza. I talked about it on the squad. I've talked about it all off season. If he is as good as advertised or what he can be, Indiana's going to be a really good offensive team. He was winning games at California, man. Like California. He went on the road to beat an SEC team with a California team. He's smart, has a high IQ, and doesn't make bad decisions. That's what Fernando Mendoza has to do in Bloomington, and the offense can absolutely be a strength for the Hoosiers in 2025.
Let me ask you this, because I tend to think Mendoza, and I really like Mendoza coming out of the portal. He's a guy who's like, man, I'm pretty happy with where the Badgers ended up going, but that was not a guy I would have been upset about if the Badgers had targeted Mendoza. Sure. Also a guy who did not play with a great offensive line at Cal, was running for his life at times. So he's got some experience being under fire.
Yep.
I thought Curtis Rourke brought incredible intangibles and leadership to this team. I mean, playing on, correct me if I'm wrong, but a torn or partially torn ACL. I just thought that dude was a total winner, the type of quarterback that's maybe a little better than some of his parts. And he was a good physical quarterback. I think Mendoza physically might be better, but man, Rourke is going to be tough to replace from a leadership intangible standpoint. He felt like a winner.
Yep. No doubt.
Any idea on how Mendoza has like ingrained himself as that guy on the team, the leader, the alpha?
So far, I mean, it's early, so it's tough to tell. They did have the spring, and now you've got summer workouts, and thankfully fall practice has come about. But I think it's the honesty that we've heard out of some of the spring practices and summer and things. They were talking about Fernando Mendoza in particular, was talking about the communication, right, with him and his receivers. They were going out to throw, and it wasn't there, and they're having to work through a lot of that. But the fact that they're open and honest about the idea of, hey, we're not on the same page, but we're going to get there. And they're willing to work on that and do the extra things. And hopefully now in fall practice, hopefully he steps into that role, because I think he's a winner. I really, really do. And he's going to have more weapons around him than he's ever had before. That gives me confidence in him to build confidence and then grow some leadership alongside him. And the fact that his receivers are veterans, they're guys who are older than him. They've been in this system longer. Maybe they can rally around him too, and they can all kind of be a leader on, I guess, leaders as a group rather than just Curtis Rourke, because you're absolutely right, man. He was unbelievable to watch a year ago. He just had that. He had it, right? He had the it factor. And so you're absolutely right. I hope Fernando Mendoza can bring that, because if he can, with the talent on the field, watch out. The Indiana offense will be pretty legit.
Let me switch it on defense for you, because there's two guys I was really like, how are they going to replace them? One of them was Rourke, and I know who the answer is there. defensively, CJ West was a monster for you. I don't think people realize how good he was. And I think that has when you have really dominant guys on in Indiana, Wisconsin, and Illinois, they kind of fly under the radar.
Yep.
That dude was incredible.
Yeah.
I know there's pieces back on defense. I know there's pieces back in the linebacker core. I know there's how do you replace him though? Because interior defense alignment with his type of burst, it's just tough to find, man.
You don't replace it man for man. You just don't. He was that good, and I'm glad that you're somebody that can appreciate other talented players on other teams, because he absolutely was that type of guy. But the good news is you have Michael Kamara on the defensive line. He's an All-American potential. You have Aiden Fisher in the linebacker room. He is an All-American returning. And then D'Angelo Pons in the secondary, who is an All-American. Now, you went to the transfer portal and you pulled a bunch of dudes out. You go get somebody like Hosea Wheeler, who's from Western Kentucky, who I think is going to be a really good player on the defensive line. You are looking to see who that second linebacker is next to Aiden Fisher. And you're also looking to see who the other corner is going to be next to D'Angelo Pons. But there's enough defensive leadership, to go back to that word for a second, that I'm confident in what that side of the ball is going to do. And until they give me a reason to worry about them defensively, whether it's up front replacing somebody like West, or in the linebacker spot, or even in the secondary, till they give me a reason, I'm not going to worry about them, because they've proven it before and I believe them to do it again. But there could be holes, and hopefully we find those early, and hopefully Indiana figures out a way to kind of overcome those and fix those. And good thing is there's depth there to fix those problems when they arise. But talk to me about the Wisconsin defense a little bit. One that historically, their bend don't break. They're going to hard nose. They got big dudes, and they just don't allow people to move the football. But can they be a unit this year going up against offenses? You mentioned it. I'm looking at it here. Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, Washington, Indiana. I mean, some of the best offenses in the Big Ten, and they're all going to be going up against Wisconsin. Do they have the dudes to survive?
Yeah, man, I hope so. Podcasting for fun when you're good. They have a really talented cornerback in Ricardo Holman that's back. We just did our locked on top on our players. He came in at 45. He's really, really good. Yeah. So they're good there. They have a couple safeties they really like. The key difference from last year, and you mentioned Wisconsin, typically big guys, stout up front, really good against the run for a stretch. So they had some of the better defenses in college football. Last year they were really light. They were just light on the front. They were light on the defensive line. They were light in the front seven. They had one guy over 300 pounds. This year they've got 6 or 7. They said this offseason, we're going to go find big guys. And maybe we won't find the most dynamic guys, but we are going to find big guys, and we're going to stop the run. We're going to be more physical. I think in that area they've improved. So it should be more stout. And when you're more stout, I say this all the time, when you're more stout against the run, you open yourself up to be better at rushing the passer, because you're going to put them in 3rd and 7. You're going to put them in 3rd and 9. You're going to put them in disadvantaged situations, which gives you some optionality as a pass rushing unit. So I think they're better this year. I still think to be elite, they're missing a dude or two in the front 7, to be honest. So I would say it's better. Mid-tier, upper mid-tier Big Ten defense, I think, is probably the ceiling this year. Well,
there you go. There's a breakdown of the rosters and what the strengths and weaknesses are, but there's a game to talk about. These two teams come together on November 15th. What will be at stake in this game? Will both coaches be there for this game, or will it be kind of a toss-up on November 15th? We talk about that in our final segment here on a Locked On crossover of Hoosiers and Badgers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with a 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor to your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies, I don't know anything about that, or just making memories with friends, I do know a little something about that. This one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or just in life itself, you need a little extra boost to stay sharp and stay energized. I carry these things all over the place. I put them in my backpack. I keep them at the office. Heck, I keep them in the fridge at my house, man. I have them all over the place because sometimes you just need a little extra kick to get you through the day, right? And whether you're on the golf course or you're doing things in life or hanging out with friends, it's about good people and good flavors. Of course, the grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of the clubhouse go-to without chasing down the beverage cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, golfswag.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid through September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. So whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5-hour energy shots today. All right, final segment, Locked On Hoosiers, Locked On Badgers. Ryan, I can't hide from it. I'm on record saying several times, my prediction for the Big Ten this year, and I hate to do it to you because you're a nice guy. My prediction is that Luke Fickell is not coaching this game. My prediction is that he's gone and let go before that Wisconsin makes the trip to Bloomington. When you look at the schedule, I think it's very possible for them to go on a big losing streak. But if you win some of those games, Luke Fickell saves his job. So that's my question, man. What's the feeling around Luke Fickell? Is his job on the line in 2025?
No, so I certainly get the sentiment, right? I certainly, if you zoom out, look at the 30,000-foot view, I certainly understand the idea of you take over a Wisconsin program that hadn't missed a bowl game in 20-something years, and you miss a bowl game in your third year. You're getting paid a ton of money, but the job, he's not in that hot of a seat. He will not be fired this year, barring some type of, it would take some type of crazy fall off the cliff type stuff or off-field stuff, which, listen, anybody can be taken down by off-field stuff, which, again, I don't think Luke Fickell's that type of guy anyway. No, it won't happen this year. It won't happen this year for a couple reasons. As frustrating as last year was, it wasn't like the wheels completely fell off. It was a 5-win season. They almost beat Oregon. They played with Penn State. And I think this year people are going to look at that schedule and say this schedule is exceedingly difficult. And because of that, there is going to be a little bit of rope still there. And there's also a financial component. Like, there's a pretty big buyout attached to Luke Fickell that is, I'm telling you, it just plays a factor. It just does.
It always
Wisconsin
does. Yeah.
is not Oregon. Most schools are not Oregon. They're not Michigan State with a billionaire in there that, Matt Ishbia type stuff. That buyout plays a factor. And then the last thing I'll throw out there, and again, I understand the question for sure. I understand the sentiment, but you got to be careful cycling coaches after 3 years, because when you do that, everybody that recruited leaves, and he's recruited actually really well. You just get into a malaise where you're constantly churning. And listen, Indiana basketball has to some degree done some of that. Yeah. So I think he's going to get 4 years almost no matter what. So this year and next year. That's not to say people aren't frustrated, and that's not to say that he doesn't feel that pressure, because he does. But yeah, I don't think it'll happen this year. I'd be stunned, in fact, if it happened this year.
Okay. Look, I don't want him to lose his job, because I told you, I like Luke Fickell, and I really liked the hire when they made it, and I think he's a good coach. I think he walked into a tough spot, and he has to get things going this year against a tough schedule. And so the question that we're answering as we wrap up in this final segment is, why will this game matter? Why is this going to be an important game for both teams? It's the second to last game of the year for Indiana. It's the third to last game of the year for Wisconsin. Indiana before this will play UCLA, at Maryland, at Penn State. Then we'll wrap up with Wisconsin and then at Purdue. Wisconsin, plays home against Ohio State, at Oregon, home for Washington before you come to Indiana, then playing Illinois and at Minnesota. I mean, if Indiana does take that step back like people are saying they are, this might be one of your prime opportunities to get a win in those final few games of the season because of the games that surround this one, right?
Yeah, let me tell you why I think this game is really interesting in our context. First of all, you hit on, beautifully said, one of their points is, if Wisconsin is going to take a step up this year, get back to a bowl game, they're going to have to trip up a couple of the Indiana-type teams. And that could be Minnesota, it could be Illinois, it could be Washington. They have to win some of those, because I love this Badgers team, man. They're not going to beat Bama. They're not going to beat Ohio State. Like, you got to beat the Hoosiers and the Fighting Illini. So I think in that sense, it's super important. But I also think in the context of where our two teams are right now, where they find themselves, it's an inflection point to some degree. There is a very clear upper tier in the Big Ten, which we know. And then you have this middle tier that's kind of churned up right now. And Indiana is kind of fighting for its spot in that hierarchy. And if they come out this year and they lose all these games to these kind of mid Wisconsin and all these other type of schools, I don't know if last year's incredible. Nothing will ever take that away. It starts to mean less if it feels like an aberration.
No doubt.
And if Wisconsin comes out and this year they go back to what they always did, which was always beating Illinois and Indiana and Minnesota, well, then last year for Wisconsin kind of feels like a bit of an aberration, right? So I think in the hierarchy of that middle tier of the Big Ten, games like this are super important this year for both programs.
Yeah, I think so. And it's tough to answer this question because it's so late in the season and so many things are possible in the non-con and all these games leading up in the Big Ten. But just these two teams on paper, just the atmosphere that it'll be. If these two teams have a respectful record, man, middle of November in Bloomington, cold weather game between Wisconsin and Indiana, you can't beat that, man. Are you guys going to travel? Will Wisconsin fans come in and take that trip in Bloomington? I mean, it's a fun place to be. I guess it may depend on kind of what the seasons are looking like, but I hope they make that trip.
I would, you just hit the part I was going to say. Well, depend on how the first part of the season goes. It really will. If the wheels do fall off, then there may be a sparse showing from the Madison crowd. Now, if it's good, Wisconsin fans always travel. It's a great fan base. So if it's a good program or a good season up to that point, a competitive season, I think they'll travel. And then listen, there's probably basketball around that time we can start talking as well, because that is going to be a ton of fun this year as well, that I'm excited to get back together with you and do some basketball crossover stuff.
Yep. Well, we'll talk again before this game on the gridiron comes together. We'll definitely be talking stuff about basketball as well, because I've been just grinding on basketball stuff because the new coach, new players. I mean, you know how it goes. There's a lot to cover on the basketball side. So we will definitely get together on that as well. He is Ryan Harings of Locked On Badgers. I'm Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. Thank you so much for being here. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to our respective channels. Leave your score predictions or comments down in the YouTube comments, and then make sure that you have those notifications turned on however you find our respective shows. And until next time, for all Badgers and Hoosier fans, stay safe, and we'll talk to you later.